Wow, this is amazing. What a crowd. In a couple of days, I'm going to return to my natural speaking home, which is the left-wing American campus. And normally when I'm in a campus audience and a large number of people begin to stand, I look for the exit. I'll actually be speaking at Columbia University on Tuesday. I plan to get there a little bit early because I want to conduct a brief search for Obama's college transcripts. They're buried in there somewhere. I want to thank my wife, Debbie, for that lovely introduction. When I actually asked her to sing God Bless America in the movie, she was a bit reluctant. She goes, Dinesh, a lot of people are going to think that you're only asking me to sing because I'm your wife. I said, honey, the reason I'm asking you to sing is because you're free. But if you saw the movie, you know that she can sing. Senator Hatch, I'm honored to share the podium with you. Governor Herbert. I'm a young Reaganite from the 1980s, and I remember Senator Hatch, I think most vividly from those unforgettable Bork hearings and the marvelous role that he's played over the years and the decades now in protecting our country and also the integrity of our courts. I was 17 years old when I first saw America. I had grown up in Mumbai, India, and I remember the airplane descending New York City. I looked out of the window, I saw the skyline of New York, I saw the Statue of Liberty, and I realized immediately that my life would be completely different from that moment on. I felt that I had moved from the margin of the world to the center. And I believed, even without thinking politically, I believed that somehow in this new country, if I stayed, I would be able to do things with my life that would be unimaginable, not only in India, but really in anywhere else in the world. America is a country in which we are the architects of our own destiny. That, I think, is the great magnetic appeal of America. That, to me, is the heart of the American dream. Many people think that immigrants come here for economic opportunity, and we do, but it's not the whole story. I've got a long-time acquaintance in Mumbai, India, who's been trying to come to America for over a decade now. Poor guy never seems to be able to get a visa. Finally, I said to him, hey, why are you so eager to come to America? He goes, Dinesh, I really want to move to a country where the poor people are fat. And, that does convey the material abundance and prosperity that America stands for. But, as I mentioned a moment ago, the real power of America is that this is a country in which our destiny isn't given to us, it's constructed by us. This is a country in which we are in the driver's seat of our own future. This American dream, in my view, was at stake in the November election. The American dream itself. And I have to say that several weeks later, here we are toward the end of February, and for me, the shock and the elation and the overwhelming sense of relief that I felt on November 8th have not in any way subsided. And may I also point out that the shock and dismay and complete horror of November 8th have not subsided for the other side either. If you know John Milton's poem Paradise Lost, it begins with the primordial scene of the rebel angels being flung headlong, hurling from the ethereal sky down into the pandemonium of hell, and there they bump into each other and it's dark and they can't see, but they are filled with rebellion and rage, and they come together and they scream and they shout and they yell and they plot. And that's pretty much a clinical description of the political left right now. And what this means, I think what this means is that we have despite the stunning victory of Trump, a victory that I can't say I predicted, but nevertheless one that took so many of us by sort of delicious surprise. I think it's going to take a little bit of history for us to appreciate the significance of the moment that we're living in now. This is not an ordinary election. This is not an ordinary moment in our country's history. Let's step back for just a moment and reflect. We think of American politics as a two-party system. But for most of American history, American politics has been dominated by one party. One party is the majority party running the country, and the other party is a kind of echo. It also ran. A party that is, in a sense, dragged with the tide. The American party system began in 1828 with Andrew Jackson, and from 1828 to 1860, the Democratic Party, almost 50 years, was the majority party. It controlled the presidency for most of that time, it controlled the Congress, it dominated the court. From 1865, when the Civil War ended, to 1932, the Republican Party was the majority party. From 1932, when FDR brought in the New Deal, to 1980, the Democrats, once again, became the dominant majority party. And what I mean by dominant is you had Republican presidents like Eisenhower, Nixon, but they were not able to reverse the fundamental priorities of the Democratic Party. Eisenhower could not, even if he wanted to, undo the New Deal. Nixon was carried by the Democratic tide and eventually ejected by it. But from 1980 to now, American politics anomalously has been divided. One party has the presidency, the other party has the Congress. We had the presidency under Reagan, but they had, for the most part, the Congress. And then Clinton was the president, but it was a Republican Congress starting in 1994. And even under Obama, we've had a Republican Congress, in a sense, holding him to account. And then, in this election, suddenly, everything went up for grabs. And had we lost it, we would have lost not only the presidency, quite likely the Senate, and also the Supreme Court. Many people said, and I think not wrongly, that the country itself was up for grabs. But just as we would have been dismayed to have lost, the dismay of the other side in losing is even more intense because they expected to win. They thought they had it in the bag. There were media reports, as you remember, that were giving Hillary a 99% chance to win the day before the election. And then it turned. Now, it's worth thinking for a moment about how Trump won. Because when you think of the terrifying forces on the other side, the Democrats had more money, they had more organization, they had the media in their pocket. I mean, I'm still haunted by these images of reporters and press, huffing and puffing to drag a crooked hag across the finish line. And you had a Republican Party, quite honestly, more divided than I've seen it in my adult life. You had Republicans egging on Hillary, Republicans who were against Trump, Republicans saying worse things about Trump than Democrats did. And all of this was going on, and so how did Trump do it? I wouldn't even say he did it with us, because for some of us, he did it despite us. We didn't think he would. I think part of what Trump did, a lesson to us all, is that for 30 years the Republican Party has been trying to win over the working class Democrats, the so-called Reagan Democrats. And the Republican appeal to the Reagan Democrats has been primarily on social issues. They're conservative socially. So the Democrats would appeal to them economically, and our side would appeal to them socially, and we try to get some of them, but we haven't gotten them since 1984. I think part of the political genius of Trump was to appeal to those voters on economic and social issues both. To appeal to them on jobs, and to appeal to them on patriotism. And this proved to be a strategy that worked. And now we have, you may say with Reagan, a chance at morning in America. Morning in America. One of the things that I tried to do in the movie Hillary's America is not only expose Hillary, but also expose a democratic progressive narrative that has haunted us and plagued us for the better part of now a generation. And this is the idea that the Republican Party is the party of bigotry, of racism. This is the race card that the Democrats have so effectively played against us, putting us up against the wall and on the defensive. And this race card, I try to sort of take away from them in this movie, which is not hard to do historically. The Democratic Party is, in fact, the party of slavery. It is the party of segregation. Every segregation law in the South, bar none, was passed by a Democratic legislature and signed by a Democratic governor. The Democratic Party is the party of the Ku Klux Klan, of lynching, of forced sterilization. This is their actual history. But in an unbelievable sleight of hand, the Democrats have taken all the bad things that they did and shifted the blame for them, have moved responsibility. How have they actually done this? Well, they've done it in two ways. The first thing they do is they take the bad stuff that they did and blame it on America, or blame it on the South, or blame it on the Republicans, even though the Republican Party has a glorious history of fighting the Democrats all the way through. You can't normally pull off this kind of a scam of such a fantastic magnitude that we have chairmen of the RNC who go before the Democrats and apologize, really for the Republican Party for things that the Republicans never did, but the Democrats actually did. Even the civil rights movement of the 1960s, more Republicans voted for the Civil Rights Act of '64, the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Bill, than Democrats did. If the Democrats had been the only party in Congress, that they controlled the House and the Senate, and it was all Democrats, none of those laws would have passed. Now, how do you pull off not only a lie, because a lie is merely an untruth. What's more difficult than a lie is to actually not only take the responsibility off yourself, but stick it on someone else. To create, if you will, a lie masquerading as a truth. How do you do that? Well, you do that in America today if you control the three biggest megaphones of American culture, which are academia, Hollywood, and the media. I don't know if you saw on television Trump's, I didn't watch his speech today, but his press conference, which was actually worth watching simply to observe the utterly constipated expressions on the faces of journalists. Why? Because their operating assumption is that they get to attack him, but he doesn't get to attack them. It's a one-way bashing that has to go on. That's the norm of the press conference. And part of what we're getting at here is a bigger picture, which is to say that in American politics there is a very carefully constructed set of rules. I almost look at them as sort of guardrails, and everybody has to march in the middle of their lane. They have to play by the rules. And this is perhaps the most distinguishing feature of the Trump presidency, is that all bets are off. He's not going to play by those rules. This is the most audacious president that I can remember in my lifetime. Even Reagan did not venture into the inner city during the campaign. Even Reagan did not accuse the Democrats of being the party of slavery and segregation. Even Reagan did not frontally take on the media. These are the moves of a man who seems to know no fear. No fear. Aristotle says that the greatest virtue is courage. Why? Because it makes all the other virtues possible. Consider a virtue like honesty. You got to speak the truth. The truth of it is that if you're a student, as my daughter is, on an elite American campus right now, it takes a lot of courage to speak the truth. It's not easy to speak the truth. You're going to be demonized, you're going to be attacked, you're going to be called all kinds of names. And so even that simple honesty requires a certain degree of boldness, requires a certain willingness to violate the prevailing etiquette.
Yes.
Trump, I think, is not trying to remake American conservatism. American conservatism is what it's really been. Now, the sad truth of it is that on most of these campuses I speak on, most young people do not reject conservatism. They don't know what it is. They've never been exposed to it. If you were to say to young people on the best of our colleges, Harvard, Berkeley, what is it that conservatives want to conserve? They would be nonplussed. They would be baffled. They would be unable to say. And if they did say, they would say something like the legacy of oppression, slavery, segregation, bigotry. That's really what they've been taught. The truth of it is that American conservatism is about conserving the principles of the American Revolution. That's what we're for. That's what we believe. We're conserving, in a strange way, a liberal idea. A liberal in the classical sense. And if we think about the American Revolution, it was based on the idea that the government is the enemy of your rights. And by the way, this applies to an elected government no less than to a monarchy. Jefferson says an elective despotism is not what we fought for. And that's why the Bill of Rights, if you read it, pretty much every clause begins the same way. Congress shall pass no law. Congress shall pass no law restricting freedom of the press. Congress shall not pass no law establishing religion, and on and on. Essentially, we protect our rights by limiting the power of the government. The first break with the American Revolution came in the early 19th century, in the early 20th century, with the movement that we now call progressivism. Because for the progressives, progress meant moving away from the American founding. Woodrow Wilson, the first, if you will, of the progressives, Teddy Roosevelt flirted with it, but Wilson was a progressive all the way through. He was the first president to ridicule the American founders. No American president had done that before him. FDR continued it. And the idea of the progressives is that government, previously seen as the enemy of rights, now becomes the securer and guarantor of rights. This is modern progressivism. And progressivism has given birth now to the movement that we call the left. And this left that we've been now confronting, that's been fighting us for 30 years, is taking on, right before our eyes, a new form. You've been listening to what they've been saying and doing. It's very paradoxical, because first of all, remember that the race card has been their traditional card to play against us. That's what makes us the bad guys. This race card has been sort of taken away from them, and so they've got a new card. The fascism card. The word most commonly used to describe Trump, he's a fascist. He's a fascist. Now, if you can remember back to Reagan and Bush, even to Goldwater, even then the left would say, Reagan's a fascist, Bush is a fascist. But I think in those cases, all they meant by it is they didn't like Reagan. Fascist was kind of a throwaway epithet. It actually meant nothing. But with Trump, they're pressing this very seriously. And it's worth thinking about. I think part of what's going for their argument is the fact that when Trump stands a certain way, looks to the left and crosses his hands, he does look a little like Mussolini. And I have it on good authority that he does like Italian food. But the resemblance kind of stops there. With Trump, the left is actually pressing the idea that not only is Trump a fascist, but the Republican Party that is now supporting him has become, in a sense, in bed with fascism. They say Trump is nationalistic, he's militaristic, he's a racist and a bigot, and all of these are the distinguishing features. He shows a kind of disregard for the democratic process. This is exactly what the Nazis did. Not the Nazis of the gas chambers, because obviously Trump hasn't gassed anybody, but the early Hitler of the 1930s. Now, the remarkable thing about this portrait of America in 2017, is it actually does somewhat resemble Weimar Germany in the early 30s. And by that I mean, never before in America have we seen, for example, a presidential inauguration openly disrupted. And disrupted by people using violence, turning over cars, burning them, bashing glass. In the 1930s, not only in Germany but also in Italy, there were street fights with people with baseball bats who would beat each other to a pulp, leaving blood on the street. And the question becomes, who is doing this? At the University of California at Berkeley, if you followed the protests of a few weeks ago, you had hundreds of people costumed in black from head to toe, wearing masks and carrying weapons. And if you look at these guys, they looked exactly, not like the Nazi brown shirts of Germany, but the black shirts of Italy. These are Mussolini's squadristi, his thugs. They looked exactly like that. And their point was to block an openly gay man, Milo, from speaking on the Berkeley campus, and to do it by force. So now we have a great paradox, because these are so-called anti-fascists. They're fighting the fascism of Trump and the fascism of the Republican Party and supposedly the gay fascism of Milo. But they're doing it in stormtrooper fashion by coming out in force and using violence to achieve their goals. How can one do this? Since when did anti-fascism use violence and force? My mind in watching this flashback in the 1960s, there was a professor at Berkeley, of all places, named Herbert Marcuse, who came up with a very telling phrase that I think is now the motto of the democratic left. His phrase was, "No free speech for fascists." No free speech for fascists. And the basic idea was, and Marcuse, by the way, a very interesting history, he was a member of the so-called Frankfurt School. He was born in Nazi Germany. He was born in Germany and fled under the Nazis to America with a whole bunch of other guys. And then he got to Berkeley, and his basic idea was, we now have to fight Nazism in America, but the way we do that is we have to use Nazi tactics. His basic idea was that we are for tolerance, our side, the left, but we don't have to be tolerant of intolerant people. We only are tolerant of other tolerant people like ourselves. But if we come across intolerant people, and his example was Hitler in the 1930s, Hitler, remember, moved up through a quasi-democratic process. His power was affirmed by the German parliament. So in a sense, Hitler came up legitimately, and yet Marcuse's point is, if we could have stopped him by shooting him or beating him to a pulp, if we could have blocked the Nazis by any means necessary, who would say that that was not the right way to go? Think of all the bloodshed and all the carnage and all the genocide that could have been avoided if violence had been used first, before Hitler became Hitler. And this idea is now being applied in the United States against us. Against us. So if you think about, I'm not just concerned with violence in the streets. To me, that's just the outward manifestation of a systemic violence and intolerance that is built into our cultural institutions. For example, if you are a conservative in Hollywood, and you associate in any way with me, there's a very good chance you will never work again. You will be completely blacklisted. And that's why all the figures who helped me on the movie 2016, who are part of the Hollywood community, used pseudonyms. There's almost no name in the credits at the end of that movie that's a real person. And when we screened that movie in Hollywood for this group called the Friends of Abe, which is a conservative group in Hollywood, has about 2,000 members, a lot of them come in masks, they come in disguised as other people, and they watch the movie, and one of them said, "Shame on us. None of us made this movie, but Dinesh, who's an outsider, he made it." But it occurred to me, none of you could have made it, because if you did make it, you'd never work again. So it is an unwritten rule in Hollywood that if someone is an outspoken conservative, they're pretty well finished. And that's why the only conservative we have in Hollywood is Clint Eastwood, who's basically been around so long that there's not a lot they can do to him. Academia has now become completely inhospitable to conservative ideas. Right after the Trump election, on my daughter's campus, there was a straight-out witch hunt that went for anyone who was in any way supportive of Trump. And the idea was to demonize them so they became pariahs for the rest of their college career. Now, the remarkable thing isn't that this is going on, is that the people who do it think that they are doing a good thing. So in other words, we now have intolerance and exclusion that feels justified in behaving that way. Why? Because it is fighting against bigotry. It's fighting against this new fascism that has supposedly invaded America. Now, the reason I'm telling you all this is it seems to me that we as Republicans, we have a big fight on our hands. It's very tempting to say we won in November, we got it all, we got the House, we got the Congress, we may get the court soon. it's time to relax. No, it's not time to relax, because it's precisely relaxing that has actually put us in a very difficult situation. Here we are fighting in one corner of the battlefield, the election. But meanwhile, the left is marching through the culture, taking over, if you will, all the high ground. And I don't just mean academia, I don't just mean Hollywood. Consider the world of comedy. A lot of young people today get their ideas from comedy. Not just their political ideas, what they think is funny, how they walk, how they talk. So the left has Colbert, they have Bill Maher, they have Jon Stewart, they have John Oliver. We have nobody, 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 and nobody. So how do we compete in this kind of an arena? Even in the world of politics, we don't bring to the table the same fanaticism that they do. And a really good example of this is the Supreme Court. Most of the nominees of the Supreme Court are nominated by Republicans. But we can't count on them. People go, how is Kennedy going to vote? Wow, we got Kennedy. Oops, we lost Roberts. Meanwhile, the left can count with Euclidean certainty on its 4 votes being delivered for the left. And why? Because Republicans want scholars who pay attention to the Constitution, and Democrats, in nominating Supreme Court nominees, make sure they get good Democrats. So they bring an ideological precision that we don't. A disproportion of forces, if you will, into the field. And remember, if we look at politics and we look at the culture, our victory is temporary, theirs is permanent. By that I mean that Trump is in for 4 years, maybe for 8 years, but then he's gone. But the left owns academia now, they'll own it tomorrow, they'll own it 10 years from now. We have no prospect of taking it. You can send me and Ben Shapiro and Milo to go speak on campuses all day. We speak on Tuesday, we're gone on Wednesday. The professors are there every day. And they control your grades. So the point I'm trying to make is this, that we as Republicans have got to realize that this isn't just a political fight, it's a broader cultural fight. And no one knows this better, I'm very happy to say, than one Donald J. Trump. When he stands up and behind him you happen to notice at Christmas time our 40 lighted Christmas trees, he's making a cultural statement. When he's willing to take on Meryl Streep and CNN and Saturday Night Live, a very dangerous weapon that Trump possesses is Twitter. Think of it this way. You and I may think it's unimportant, but why is the media so determined that they take away Trump's Twitter? Because the media knows that if you take away Trump's Twitter, then by and large, the only way for Trump to get through to the American people is through the filter of the media. They want to be the sole exclusive filter that tells you what Trump said and what to think about what he said. And Trump, with Twitter, this ridiculous Twitter, is able to sort of daintily leapfrog right over them. Now, when I go on Twitter and I do something on social media every morning, within 5 seconds of me going on there, 15 leftists have come on and roundly abused me. They abuse me for my looks, my weight, my family. They attack Debbie. They ridicule me. I'm a felon. I'm this, I'm that. And this is all in the first 10 seconds of me tweeting, which tells me that these are actually paid goons who are doing this. Now I mention this to you I mention this to you because this is not how we think. We wouldn't dream of hiring 10 guys where every time Nancy Pelosi went out to tweet something, they would ridicule her weight, her smile, her size, her grandchildren, attack her family, abuse her heritage. Why does the left do this? Because they realize that normal people can't stand it. That if they actually do this to you every day, relentlessly, unceasingly, a normal person will say, who needs it? Why am I in public life doing this? What's the point of it? All I get is this sort of endless, violent abuse. Who wants to live, if you will, in the mud? Well, I mean, I guess I do. Many years ago, William F. Buckley came to speak to a group of us conservatives on the Dartmouth campus, and he raised a very interesting question. He said, how can you be a conservative in a liberal society? And what he meant by this is that the campus is a left wing. Their whole way of doing business is shaped by the left. That is the existing prevailing regnant culture. And Buckley's point is, normally the job of a conservative is to conserve. But if you are on a liberal campus, what do? Conserve liberalism? That's the dilemma. And Buckley's solution was actually rather blunt. He said, if you are living in that kind of culture, you have to sort of stop being a conservative. And what he meant is, you don't stop being a philosophical conservative, but you have to stop being a tactical conservative. You actually have to begin to think in a more rebellious, guerrilla-like way, because your conservative task, ironically enough, is to destabilize the prevailing liberal culture. It is to overturn the apple cart. When I was a young rebel at the Dartmouth Review, we used to tell the deans that taking on our renegade Reaganite paper was a bit like wrestling with a pig. Not only did you get everyone dirty, but the pig liked it. And I'm here in the age of Trump and in the spirit of Trump to urge you and to urge the Republicans, our team, to get ready for the fight that is right, not ahead of us, it's right here. It's going on right now. The goal of the left is really simple. They're not going to wait Trump out. No way. The same people who wanted to try to cancel the election by incessant recounts, by calling up the electors, telling them to vote differently, their goal is to get Trump out, preferably sooner than later, and by any means necessary. He is the biggest threat to the Democratic Party since Abraham Lincoln. In previous cases, if we won, our victories would be temporary and the left would have a hope of coming back. When Nixon won by a landslide, they said, that's okay, we'll try to figure out how to get him out of there. Trump represents a mortal threat to their credibility, to their viability as institutions. And so what we have is an array of forces against Trump that is unprecedented in American politics. And the media was against Reagan. But the vehemence of their attack on Trump, the determination of it, the relentlessness of it, that's something that we have to be ready for. The good news is the Republican Party has been up to many challenges in the past. We have rallied to the occasion. Now, normally in American politics, we don't have to fight. Just like normally in your home, you don't need to study the blueprints of your house. Right? You just sleep on the couch, you walk in the hallway. It's only when your house begins to shake that you say, oh, I better get up in the attic, I better look at those blueprints, I better see how this thing was put together in the first place, because my house itself is starting to shake. American politics is being shaken at its core by a very powerful left that has no intention of going away and has no intention of letting us govern. They don't approach it the way we did. If they had won, we would not do to them what they're doing to us. And that shows us that they don't think like us. And what we learn from that is that we have to learn to think a little more like them. Why? Because that's the way to protect our country at a time when the American dream itself still hangs in the balance. I'll close with the words that Reagan used. Reagan once said that our country is the only country whose anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner, ends with a question. Oh, say, do you see the Star-Spangled Banner? It's a question, and it's ultimately us. It is we. And it is Republicans, most of all, who need to answer that question. Thank you very much.